If you could look into your future, 10, 20, 50 years from now, what would you hope to see? A mansion? A medal? A million followers? What if the real answer is something quieter, softer, but far more powerful? Today, I'm going to tell you the truth about happiness that billions of dollars and decades of research have revealed. And it's not what you think. Imagine dedicating your life not to fame or wealth, but to understanding why some people live deeply fulfilling lives and others don't. That's what a group of Harvard researchers did. For over 80 years, they followed hundreds of people, tracking health, careers, marriages, and joy. The goal was simple: unlock the secret to a good life. We've been told that success breeds happiness, that if we work hard enough, look good enough, or earn enough, happiness will follow. But the study reveals the opposite. Happiness is not the result of success, it is the foundation of it. And that foundation, above all, is connection. The clearest, strongest finding: good relationships keep us happier and healthier, not wealth, not fame, not even perfect health in our youth. It's the quality of our bonds, with friends, with family, with partners, that determines how long and how well we live. Chronic loneliness doesn't just hurt emotionally, it shortens lives. It's as damaging to our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. But unlike smoking, loneliness is often invisible. That's why we have to be intentional about love, friendship, and community. Every single day, you don't need dozens of best friends. Even small, positive interactions, a smile to a stranger, a kind message, a real "how are you?" can nourish our well-being. The study found that people who consistently invested in even casual relationships were measurably happier over time. A good life isn't something we stumble upon, it's something we build. Every honest conversation, every moment of vulnerability, every time we choose connection over isolation, we are laying the bricks of a happier future. In the late 1930s, at Harvard University, researchers began a bold and intimate experiment. They chose two groups of young men, one from Harvard's prestigious campus, the other from the most disadvantaged neighborhoods in Boston. These participants were vastly different in background, race, income, and opportunity. But they had one thing in common: they were all at the very start of their adult lives. The researchers followed them for decades, not just through surveys, but through medical exams, in-person interviews, conversations with spouses and children, and eventually even brain scans. They tracked their joys, heartbreaks, career choices, illnesses, marriages, divorces, triumphs, and breakdowns. And when those men grew old, the study didn't stop. It expanded to include their children and grandchildren. Generations of families became part of the research. Over time, this became the longest-running study on human happiness ever conducted, spanning more than 80 years and still continuing today. The aim was never to judge or prescribe, but to observe and learn. What patterns emerge over a lifetime? What factors make people thrive, not just survive, as the decades unfold? Through wars, recessions, love stories, betrayals, victories, and grief, the study quietly watched and recorded the hidden architecture of a meaningful life. We live in a world that constantly measures us: grades, salaries, followers, awards. From a young age, we are quietly, and sometimes loudly, taught that success is the gateway to happiness. We're told that if we just work hard enough, look a certain way, go to the right school, land the ideal job, and check off all the boxes that society lays out for us, we'll eventually arrive at that elusive place where happiness lives. It becomes a chase, an endless race toward more achievements, more recognition, more security, more validation. But the truth, as revealed by the data from this decades-long study, is far more nuanced and in many ways startling. The researchers watched as participants climbed social ladders, built careers, and accumulated wealth. Some became doctors, lawyers, CEOs, even U.S. presidents. Others struggled through poverty, illness, and instability. But when researchers compared their well-being, not their resumes, not their bank balances, but their actual lived experience of life. It became overwhelmingly clear that external success did not guarantee internal peace or emotional satisfaction. In fact, many of the men who seemed to have it all on paper, fame, fortune, influence, reported feeling isolated, restless, and disconnected. Their accomplishments may have been visible to the world, but what was invisible was the anxiety, the broken relationships, the loneliness that crept in once the applause faded. And conversely, there were participants who lived modestly, who never reached financial abundance or public acclaim, but who described themselves as deeply fulfilled. Why? Because they had love, because they had connection, because they had people in their lives who made them feel seen, supported, and safe. This challenges the very narrative we've grown up with, that happiness is the result of success. What this study shows is that it's often the other way around. When people feel emotionally secure, when they belong, when they love and are loved in return, they are more likely to be resilient, creative, generous, and yes, even successful by traditional standards. Their well-being becomes a quiet but powerful fuel for everything else they do. Success without connection, on the other hand, often leads to emptiness disguised as achievement. The illusion that happiness is a destination you reach after climbing high enough, earning enough, or proving yourself enough is not only misleading, it's dangerous. It keeps us chasing things that can never satisfy our deeper needs and teaches us to ignore the very things that truly nourish us: presence, purpose, intimacy, and emotional authenticity. As the decades unfolded in the lives of the study's participants, through every shift in career, health, income, and circumstance, one factor emerged as the most consistent and powerful predictor of happiness. Not intelligence, not ambition, not even genetics, but the quality of a person's relationships. Again and again, through thousands of pages of interviews and medical data, it became clear. Those who felt deeply connected to others, who had people they could trust, confide in, and rely on, were not only happier, but physically healthier. Their minds stayed sharper, their bodies aged more gently, and their emotional lives were more stable, even during periods of great stress or loss. This truth defies much of what modern culture glorifies. We idolize independence, often confusing it with strength. We praise self-sufficiency as the ultimate form of empowerment. But this study, across generations and social backgrounds, reveals something far more human and humbling, that our well-being is profoundly relational. It isn't weakness to need others, it's biology, it's our evolutionary design. We are wired to connect, and when we don't, or when those connections are shallow, broken, or missing, we suffer, not just emotionally, but physically. The body keeps score of emotional disconnection. Blood pressure rises, sleep worsens, immunity weakens, our sense of meaning dulls. And it isn't about having a large social circle or a perfect romantic partner. It's about feeling safe and understood in at least a few key relationships. Some of the most resilient participants in the study had just one or two deeply meaningful connections. They didn't need constant companionship or grand gestures. They needed to be known, to be truly seen and accepted, not just for their strengths or public image, but for their struggles, their fears, their flaws. The people who thrived emotionally and physically were those who could show up honestly in their relationships and be met with empathy. What's even more striking is that relationships don't just support happiness, they shape how we experience happiness. A joyful moment shared with someone close multiplies in its impact. A painful moment, when held with someone who listens without judgment, becomes more bearable. Relationships provide a mirror through which we interpret our lives. They give context to our joy, meaning to our efforts, and comfort in our darkest hours. This human connection, in its truest form, doesn't depend on perfection. It depends on presence, on consistency, on mutual care and respect, even in imperfection. When people think about threats to their health, they tend to think of the visible ones: poor diet, lack of exercise, smoking, excessive drinking. But one of the most underestimated dangers to our physical and emotional well-being is something far less visible, often silent, and sometimes even shameful to admit: loneliness. What this decades-long study found, with striking clarity, is that prolonged loneliness is not just emotionally painful, it is biologically damaging. In fact, it is as harmful to the human body as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. That comparison is not metaphorical, it is rooted in data. The physical toll of chronic isolation literally breaks us down. Loneliness doesn't always mean being alone. It's not simply the absence of people around us, it's the absence of connection. It's the feeling that no one truly sees you, hears you, or understands you. It can happen in a crowded room, in a bustling office, even within a marriage. It's that quiet ache of emotional disconnection, of going through the motions with no one to fully share your inner world with. And when that feeling persists, it begins to shape how we experience everything else: how we sleep, how we eat, how we process stress, how our immune systems respond, how our brains age. Biologically, loneliness triggers the body's stress response. Cortisol levels rise, blood pressure increases, inflammation spreads. Over time, these stressors compound, accelerating wear and tear on organs and tissues. The body, designed to operate within the warmth of human connection, begins to treat social isolation like a threat. Because from an evolutionary standpoint, being cut off from the group once meant danger, predators, exposure, vulnerability. Our nervous systems haven't evolved past that response. The loneliness of the modern world still sets off the same alarms as it did in the ancient one. And it's not just the body that suffers. The mind deteriorates under chronic loneliness. Cognitive decline appears earlier. Depression becomes more likely. Motivation fades. And most tragically, when people are lonely for long enough, they often begin to internalize the belief that they are unworthy of connection, creating a painful feedback loop. They withdraw further, trust less, share less, and the very thing they most need, intimacy, empathy, real human presence, feels harder and harder to reach. Loneliness is not a personal failure. It's a public health crisis, one that affects people across all ages, backgrounds, and walks of life. It does not discriminate between successful and struggling, rich or poor, young or old. In fact, some of the most outwardly accomplished participants in the study were the loneliest, precisely because their lives were built on performance, not vulnerability. And when the applause stopped, they found themselves without the depth of connection that sustains us not just during the highlights, but in the long, ordinary days in between. When we think about relationships and happiness, our minds often go to the big, dramatic gestures: falling in love, lifelong friendships, family bonds tested and restored. But what the research shows, quite powerfully, is that it's not just the grand relationships that define the texture of our lives. It's also the small, everyday interactions, the seemingly insignificant moments that quietly shape our emotional landscape. A warm smile from a neighbor, a light conversation with a stranger in line at the cafe, a brief but genuine check-in from a colleague. All of these moments act as subtle but essential threads, weaving us into the social fabric that keeps us emotionally whole. We tend to underestimate these interactions because they feel fleeting. They don't carry the weight of history or commitment. But the study reveals that people who consistently engaged in small social exchanges, those who made eye contact, who greeted others with sincerity, who allowed moments of connection in even routine encounters, reported significantly higher levels of life satisfaction. These interactions serve as micro-reinforcements of belonging. They remind us that we are not invisible, that we are seen, and that we exist in a world where kindness and recognition are still possible. These small exchanges also buffer us against the isolating effects of modern life. In a time where technology often replaces touch and conversation, where people walk through the world with headphones in and eyes down, these tiny moments of connection have become rare, and therefore more powerful. They cut through the digital haze and bring us back into the presence of others, however briefly. And the effects are cumulative. just as neglect in relationships wears us down over time. Small doses of positive interaction build us up, anchoring us in a shared human experience. For people who struggle with deeper relationships, because of trauma, shyness, or circumstances, these minor moments can be especially vital. They are low-risk, high-reward opportunities to feel connected without the vulnerability that deeper relationships often demand. Over time, these small interactions can build confidence, openness, and even lead to more meaningful connections. But even if they don't evolve into something larger, their emotional value stands on its own. A kind word, a shared laugh, a nod of recognition. These are the soul's quiet reminders that we are not alone. What's remarkable is that the benefit is mutual. When we offer these moments to others, we aren't just lifting their spirits, we're elevating our own. The simple act of reaching out, of making someone feel seen or valued, reinforces our own sense of purpose and connection. The study revealed that people who intentionally cultivated these moments throughout their day, who chose to engage rather than withdraw, were more likely to report long-term happiness, emotional resilience, and even better physical health. In a world that often tells us we must do something big to matter, these findings are a powerful reminder that we already have, within us, the tools to make life better, for ourselves and for others, one small human moment at a time. One of the most comforting, and at the same time, most sobering, truths that emerged from the study is this: a good life is not something that happens to us. It is not gifted by luck, inherited through privilege, or stumbled upon in a moment of fate. A good life is something we create, day by day, decision by decision, moment by moment. It's not built overnight, and it's not preserved by accident. It is a mosaic of effort, care, and conscious attention, especially when it comes to our relationships and how we choose to show up in them. We live in a culture that often romanticizes the idea of sudden transformation. We want the shortcut, the life-changing breakthrough, the moment when everything suddenly makes sense or falls into place. But the study, with its patient accumulation of human stories across lifetimes, shows us a quieter truth. The people who lived the most fulfilling lives didn't wait for happiness to find them. They practiced it. They prioritized it. They shaped it in the way they tended to their connections, how they dealt with conflict, how they forgave, how they stayed present even when life was messy, even when it hurt. These participants weren't perfect. In fact, many of them made painful mistakes. Some had difficult marriages, estranged children, personal failures, addictions, regrets. But what mattered most wasn't the absence of hardship. It was their willingness to keep investing in life despite those hardships, to keep building, brick by brick, the foundations of trust, of intimacy, of mutual care. The good life, for them, wasn't found at the peak of success or in the comfort of ease. It was forged in the decision to keep showing up, to write the letter, make the call, offer the apology, stay at the table when things got hard. What becomes clear over time is that meaningful relationships and lasting happiness do not emerge from grand gestures or rare moments. They arise from ordinary consistency, checking in, being kind when it would be easier not to be, choosing to listen instead of judge, choosing to stay rather than turn away. The good life grows in the soil of daily effort, the often unseen work of being emotionally available, of saying, "I love you," "I hear you," or even just, "I'm here," with sincerity and intention. It's not dramatic, but it is deeply courageous. And because the good life is built, it is also fragile. It requires maintenance. It requires repair. The study found that those who were happiest later in life weren't necessarily those who had smooth paths, but those who repaired their relationships when they fractured, who didn't let pride win, who picked up the phone, who chose grace over being right. It takes humility to build a good life, and it takes endurance, but it also gives back more than anything else we chase, because while achievements fade and circumstances shift, the warmth of human connection, when nurtured, becomes the anchor we return to, again and again. So what makes a good life? Not the job title on your email signature, not the number of likes on your latest post, not the amount in your bank account. It's the people you laugh with, the ones you call when the world falls apart, the quiet mornings with someone you love. If there's one thing this extraordinary study teaches us, it's this: our relationships are the greatest investment we will ever make. So tonight, instead of another hour of work, call someone you love. Send that message. Start a conversation that matters. Because in the end, the good life is not about what we do. It's about who we do it with.